Happy Monday, Miami Dolphins fans. Welcome to Dolphins Today by Chat Sports, where we have a different edition of Dolphins Today. We're based in Dallas, Texas, and because of the snow and ice, forced to work from home here. But we have a lot to talk about, specifically head coach Jeff Hafley making major changes to this Dolphins locker room and coaching staff. We documented the Bobby Slowick hire on Saturday. He is the new offensive coordinator for Miami, but that isn't a change, right? Yeah, he gets an upgrade in position and title, but he was on the staff last year. But there was two people that Hafley brought in that is new blood to the Dolphins coaching staff, to the Dolphins building. And I want to talk about them. One's being Tyke Tolbert, who's going to be the new wide receiver coach for Miami, and then Todd Hunt, who is the new strength and conditioning leader for the Miami Dolphins. But make sure you subscribe to the channel because we will have you covered on all Miami Dolphins news, even when we're not able to be inside the office. But let's get into the new wide receiver coach here, Tyke Tolbert, because he is very experienced. He's been in the NFL for over 20 years. Started with the Arizona Cardinals in 2003, was with our division rival, the Buffalo Bills, for multiple years, 04 to 09, bounced around from Carolina, Denver, was on that Broncos staff that won the Super Bowl in 2015 against the Panthers and Cam Newton. Then he was with the Giants, the Bears, and then the last two seasons he has been the wide receiver coach with the Tennessee Titans. Now, by the way, he's been the wide receiver coach every stop in the NFL, so he's never had a different role other than that, besides one time. With the Chicago Bears in 2022 and 2023, he had the wide receiver coach title, but also was the pass game coordinator. Now, in those couple of years with Justin Fields, I think you can say that they were not known for throwing the football effectively. So I don't know. I can't judge Tolbert based off the lack of success in Chicago with them being able to throw the football. But when you look at some of these wide receivers that he's coached throughout his career, I mean, with Arizona, he had the young Anquan Boldin, rookie, who obviously is a Hall of Famer, had 101 receptions and 1,300 yards in that first initial season with Tolbert as wide receivers coach in 03. I mean, he had Eric Moles, Lee Evans in Buffalo. He coached Steve Smith with Carolina in 2010. When he was in Denver for the 7 seasons, he had Eric Decker, Demaryius Thomas, Emmanuel Sanders, Wes Welker. He even coached Brandon Marshall as well. I mean, you look at some of the important kind of milestones that some of these people that he coached ultimately hit. Like, he coached Brandon Marshall when he had multiple 100-catch seasons. That Demaryius Thomas, rest in peace, 5-time Pro Bowler. Emmanuel Sanders was a 2-time Pro Bowler. Eric Decker had a year out of nowhere where he had 1,200 yards and 11 touchdowns. He even coached Cortland Sutton early in his career. He becomes a Pro Bowler later in his career. I'm not saying Tolbert has to do with all of that, but he certainly impacts a little bit. And then when he was with the Giants from 2018 to 2021, coached Odell Beckham Jr. So yeah, that was a little bit at the end of OBJ's time in New York, but still working under Tolbert, and it's an intriguing hire to say the least. And we're continuing to look at him here. He's got his work cut out for him here because the Dolphins wide receiver roster is absolutely fascinating. You have Jalen Waddle, who you assume is going to return next year, but you never know if jon-eric wants to tear things down and trade him away to get first-round draft capital to rebuild this team in the trenches. I don't expect, but you never know. Tyreek Hill, he's assuredly going to be cut, so you can't count on him next season. You have Malik Washington returning for his third year. Taj Washington, he'll be a fringe roster guy this season because he wasn't drafted by this current regime, but he is going to come and try to make the roster for a third year. Theo Weiss Jr., the second-year UDFA, who showed some promise in the preseason and at the final 3 weeks of the season with Quinn Ewers. Does he make the roster? You'll have to coach him up. And then the one that not a lot of people are talking about is Nick Westbrook-Akini here. He signed a 2-year contract with with Miami in the offseason. I was very optimistic about him and what he was going to be able to bring to the table for Miami this season with his size, his blocking, and that evidently wasn't the case. And with him having 1 year left on his deal, I see Nick Westbrook-Ikhine as a cut candidate that we really haven't mentioned so far in the offseason here. And we'll talk more about here cutting Westbrook-Ikhine, but confidence level in Jeff Hafley. He's making changes to the Miami Dolphins. He's hiring people. What's your confidence level in Coach Haf? Scale of 1 to 10. But you look at Nick Westbrook-Ikhine here, you save $1.5 million if you cut him pre-June 1st, $2.5 million post-June 1st. Do I think they're going to cut him post-June 1st? No, probably not. If they do end up moving on, it'll probably be any time between now and free agency in early March. But he was so disappointing for Miami, and if he doesn't fit what Bobby Slowick wants to do, he doesn't fit what Jon-Eric Sullivan and Jeff Hafley want to do with this new look Dolphins offense that's probably way more predicated on under center, running the ball, physical in the trenches, and then run play action off of it, he could easily be cut. Now, I got to be honest, I'm going to start drinking the Kool-Aid a little bit on NWI because I think if you are going to go to that offense that is under center more, running the football more, and set up play action, I think Westbrook-Ikhine might be able to thrive in that level offense a little bit better. I thought he was going to do the same thing for Miami this year in the cheat action, the motions, the exotic run schemes that Mike McDaniel had. That evidently wasn't the case. But if you want to go back to a Green Bay Packer mold of offense, of smash mouth football, and then build off of that with some shotgun runs and some play actions from under center, screen plays, what we saw from Matt LaFleur and Kyle Shanahan, well, then Westbrook-Ikhine might actually succeed in this offense. So it's going to certainly be an intriguing choice for this new coaching staff and front office to make on the future of Nick Westbrook-Ikhine. We got more coaching news, including Todd Hunt, the new strength and conditioning coach in Miami. But today's show is brought to you by Prize Picks. The big game is officially set: New England and Seattle. That's coming up in a couple weeks, and as there's only one more football game left in the season, if you want to get in on the action, Prize Picks is the best place to do that, where you get $50 in lineups right now when you play your first $5. They've got so many great features, even with football not here. There's basketball every night, there's hockey, golf is back, baseball is a month and a half away, and injury reboots is one of my favorite things they have. If your player gets hurt in the first half and does not return to play in the second half, that doesn't ruin your lineup. That player just gets removed, and then the rest of the players in your lineup ultimately continue on to try to see if you were correct and you can cash out. So easy to play. Just pick more or less on at least 2-player stat projections, and you can cash in. Join me and the millions of others on Prize Picks today. Download the app, and when you sign up, use code CLNS to get $50 in lineups when you play your first $5 lineup. That's code CLNS to get $50 in lineups when you play your first $5 lineup. Prize Picks. It's good to be right. All right, let's move on from Tolbert here at the wide receiver coach position to one that might be more important, if we're going to be honest, and that is the strength and conditioning coach of the Miami Dolphins. It's going to be Todd Hunt now, and he is coming from Green Bay. So we've now seen 3 Green Bay people travel to Miami: Jon-Eric Sullivan as GM, Jeff Hafley as head coach, and then Todd Hunt as a strength and conditioning coach. I would expect there to be more coaches to follow from Green Bay to Miami. We'll see. We're still having our defensive coordinator search. We hired, obviously, Slowick as offensive coordinator, but Hunt spent a lot of time in Green Bay the last couple of years, 2024, 2025, with Jeff Hafley. Prior to that, he was with the Cincinnati Bengals in 2019. All the way through 2023. So he's worked with a lot of good quarterbacks, Jordan Love, Joe Burrow. Now, one can be said, there's been some injury concerns with those two guys in the past. And when you actually read up about Todd Hunt and his role in Green Bay over the last 2 years, he obviously strength and conditioning coach, but he operated with a specialty focus on quarterbacks, running backs, tight ends, linebackers, specialists. That's his exact role. Now, what is he going to do in Miami? I don't know. That's going to still obviously be determined, but this is an area that Miami just desperately needs to improve at. Like, all of us fans have been super angry and upset with the long, lengthy list of injury reports early on in the season, later on in the season, even though that's bound to happen. Miami's been one of the more injury-plagued teams since 2022. Now, you can blame the man who was the strength and conditioning coach prior to that. I don't want to throw him under the bus, but that is Brent Callaway, no longer likely going to be in Miami. We'll see, though. That's not determined, but there's just been so many major injuries. I mean, Jalen Phillips tore his ACL and Achilles. We had Tyreek Hill's nasty leg injury, and I guess that's a freak injury. You can't blame it there, but when you see so many major injuries over the last 3-4 seasons under Mike McDaniel and this current regime of strength and conditioning coach, you just have to wonder, all right, why is that? Because Bradley Chubb tore his ACL, MCL, and PCL in 2023. Tua Tagovailoa's concussions. I mean, Connor Williams got a major injury when he was the Dolphins center a couple years ago. Jalen Waddle actually has played more games than you think, but he is always in and out of the lineup in the middle of these games. So there's always injury concern with the Miami Dolphins, and you just hope that a new strength and conditioning coach could ultimately stop that or at least turn it around. But we'll ultimately see if the new man for the job, Todd Hunt, can do that. One last hire that I want to talk about before we sign off today has nothing to do with the coaching. This has to do with the front office. This happened late on Friday. We made a short about it, but we didn't talk about him in depth. That would be Kyle Smith, assistant GM in Miami. Jon-Eric Sullivan gets his right-hand guy. This is someone who had that same exact role in Atlanta since 2023. So 2023, 2024, 2025, he was the assistant general manager. Before becoming the assistant GM with the Falcons and Terry Fontenot, he was the vice president of player personnel in 2021 and 2022. So he was with Atlanta's front office in a high-level role from 2021 to 2025. But he has ties to Washington as well. He spent a decade there, began as a scouting intern in 2010, then becomes a scout full-time 2011 to 2016 in Washington, director of college scouting from 2017 to 2019, and then is the vice president of player personnel in 2020. They have a lot of turnover and ownership around then, and then he joins the Atlanta Falcons. He's the son of former Chargers GM A.J. Smith, and you obviously can never tell the reasons why you make certain draft picks, right, in the draft. But you look at some of these drafts he was a part of, and I truly do believe he fits the same way of thinking as our GM, Jon-Eric Sullivan, right? What is something he preaches? He preaches draft, develop, extend. He preaches, hey, we're going to take the best player for our organization, whether it be the Miami Dolphins, Green Bay Packers, or in Kyle Smith's case, Atlanta Falcons. And a lot of people scratch their head when Atlanta took Michael Penix in the 2024 first round with that 8th overall pick when they signed Kirk Cousins in the offseason. But what did they think? Now, it obviously seems to have not worked out, and they might have taken the worst quarterback in that draft class. But the point I'm trying to make is they drafted Penix because they believed he was the best player for the Atlanta Falcons. Even if it didn't work out, that's what they believed. And that is the exact belief that Jon-Eric Sullivan has. Taking Jordan Love when they had Aaron Rodgers in the first round. Taking Aaron Rodgers when they had Brett Favre. Goes on and on and on. And when you look at his time in Washington, they drafted Chase Young. They drafted Daron Payne. They drafted Montez Sweat. They had a lot of priority on the defensive line, and they had a lot of priority on taking the best players for their specific teams. I mean, I know he was just a scout back then in Washington, but they drafted RG3, number 2 overall, and then what do they do later in that draft? They take Kirk Cousins, and obviously Kirk Cousins was the better quarterback. They've prioritized skill positions in Atlanta with Kyle Smith at the helm from 2021 to 2025, right? Bijan Robinson, Drake London, Kyle Pitts, Michael Penix. This past year, obviously don't know his influence, they take James Pierce, they take Jalen Walker, they take Billy Bowman, Xavier Watts. They had a ton of impact defensively from the rookie class. I don't know if he had a lot to do with it. You can never know from the outside, but I'm just kind of laying out what the draft strategy has been in Washington, in Atlanta, when Kyle Smith has had a large role inside that front office. And I wanted to read this quote before we get out of here today. Kyle Smith talking about the draft, saying everybody in the league grades a little bit different, but the commonality is through buckets. The first bucket is win because of starters. These guys you can say elite, high level, whatever that is. The bucket is every year, depending on the year, a smaller bucket. Below that is your winning starters. That bucket is a bit bigger. And underneath that is your good role players, depth players. Whenever you're in the first round, you're trying to pick from that top bucket. If you have been with me since the Dolphins hired Jon-Eric Sullivan as their GM, does that not sound exactly like this team building strategy Sullivan laid out, right? He talked about you need to figure out who are your star players, who are your guys that are starters. You need to figure out who your guys that thrive in their role but aren't elite to where you're paying them a bunch of money. It's the same common way of thinking. And that is why I think the Dolphins hired Kyle Smith as the assistant GM, because Jon-Eric Sullivan can go to him and trust him that they're trying to build this new Dolphins team the same way. Like, we'll see if they ultimately work out, but the line of thinking, we're aligned. We have a clear-cut vision with Sully, with Jeff Hafley, and now with Kyle Smith as assistant GM, and I couldn't be more excited to see how they try to jumpstart this rebuild this offseason with a bunch of draft capital. They have 5 picks right now in the top 90, 3 in the third round, 1 in the first round, 1 in the second round. We'll see if they accumulate more draft picks by making trades in the draft or trading veterans away. Ultimately remains to be seen, but I am super excited for this offseason. Even if Miami's not going to be good next year, we are going to see a lot of new young faces and talent infused into this roster, and it will be a sight to behold. We will have you covered every step of the way in the offseason, so hit that sub button and lock us in. We'll see you later with another video. Go Fins.